I went and I asked about 100 to 150 other consultants, and a lot of my friends are consultants. And, hey, how do you get clients? How do you figure out pricing? How does consulting work for you? So when we talk about getting started with consulting, this is really the summation of not just my experience, but let's say a couple hundred of my friends and acquaintances as well. So let's talk about the dream. And there's a lot of truth here. Consultants are rock stars. They travel the world, pandemic willing, are world-class experts, do meaningful work, have lots of freedom, and are extremely highly paid. And there's a lot of truth there, for sure. Reality, lots of deadlines. I have 3 deadlines today. You don't have a boss, you have multiple bosses, multiple clients. People talk about the feast and famine of consulting. You have a lot of work, then you don't have any, then you have a lot, and so forth. It's not all exciting work. I don't love writing reports. I don't love writing proposals. I don't mind. I do it. I travel a lot. Now, a large extent because I choose to when I do, but you know, my last flight, and I've only had a few since the pandemic started, I came so close to being stranded, both going because of a hurricane between me and Virginia Beach, and I almost got stranded coming back in DC. And DC's fine, but Dulles Airport is dull. So let's just start from the beginning. What's a consultant? Because people confuse this. First of all, we all know what an employee is, right? You have a job. You work for one organization. Hopefully you love it. I'm not anti-job. I loved my first job. Absolutely. Contractor is not the same as consultant. Most contractors work for one employer. And they might have different remuneration or financial terms, but you're paid for your time. So a friend of mine had a job for well over a decade. He was laid off. He came back literally the next day as a contractor. Same desk, same coworkers, same work. He's not a consultant. You may use that term if you'd like. He's a contractor. Consultant. Typically with a consultant, you have multiple clients. So this year alone, I think I've worked for 5 different clients. If I go and I list them out in my mind, one hasn't paid me yet, but that's happening. You have a lot more control. You can say no. I turned down something just last week. It wasn't the right thing for me. And ideally, you're paid for results, right? You're not paid for your time. Ideally, you're paid for results. Now, usually there's some kind of mix here. Now, granted, there is some overlap between these 3. There's employees that consult on the side. Consultants sometimes take contracts and so forth. But they are different. We talk about consulting models. We're going to talk about being a full-time independent consulting, as well as a little bit about consulting on the side for sure, because the same things apply. Now, I remember when I started consulting, there was a recession going on, and people tried to talk me out of consulting. And there are all these people that have been laid off, they're unemployed, walking around saying, I'm a consultant. Hey, if you've never had a client, you really are looking for a job, you're not a consultant, right? You're unemployed. If you want to say consultant, that sounds better. That's perfectly cool. You could be a consultant working for a consulting firm or consulting company. A number of my friends do that. A number of my friends love doing that. We are not talking about that, okay? Similar skill set in many ways, but you're an employee. You could be an employee or contractor who consults on the side, and that's real popular. Often that's a lot more popular and common than people think. Often people say, well, you know, my job won't let me. That may or may not be true, okay? And I have a lot of friends that have become consultants that then take a full-time job and then maybe bounce back to consulting or contracting, that bounce around. And sometimes people have the mindset, oh, that's a failed consultant. They took a full-time job. But I have a number of friends, some pretty impressive, you'd know their names, who have bounced between consultant and full-time employee or contractor. They don't really care what title they have. They're just looking for exciting, interesting, hopefully well-paying, meaningful work. So consulting is a business, and it's a great business for a lot of reasons. I'm not going to go through all of these bullets, but like low startup costs, right? I just worked out of my house when I began. I bought a laptop, probably 90% profit. In general, degrees, I wish I had finished my doctorate. And I was Dr. Demopoulos, right? But I haven't. I have a bunch of certifications. They really don't matter when you have a lot of experience. When you have less experience, degrees and certifications matter more. In terms of licensing, there's generally no licensing required. One big exception for some of us, in some jurisdictions, like I think the state of Texas and Michigan, to do digital forensics work, you need to be a licensed professional, a private investigator, a PI. A friend of mine did that. It was not that hard. I had to sign something for him saying, I promise he is a good person of good moral character and so forth. But generally, you don't need that. And although not all consultants consider themselves entrepreneurs, it's a relatively easy way to start. Now, the one thing that shocked me the most when I started consulting, I didn't realize I was going to be running a business. I was like, no. It's like, I'm like a geek. I like this technology stuff. And if I become a consultant, I'll be able to do exactly what I want. I'll have more freedom, more choice over projects that I pick, and hopefully make good money as well. And I did. But I didn't realize I was running a business. You have to have or acquire some business skills. Now, not everyone likes this. Personally, I like hacking the business stuff as much as I like hacking technology. But this was kind of a surprise for me that I'm running a business now. I have to figure out how to invoice clients and to find clients and so forth. And we are going to talk a lot about finding clients in a little bit. So since you're running business, you have to start the business. Now, when I started, I just said, I am Demopoulos Associates, because it sounded like I should have associates and be bigger. Now, in fact, it's me. I have a support staff, part-time support staff. I do bring friends and colleagues into projects. But I didn't file any paperwork or did anything. And this is really common. Eventually, after 2 years, the bank hassled me. It took 2 years. They said, your check says Demopoulos Associates. You're Ted Demopoulos. And they're kind of a pain in the butt. So I said, okay, what do I need to do? And they told me, and I said, I think I'm going to walk to that bank down the street. And I walked down to another bank and said, hey, will you take this check? And they said, sure. But you're really supposed to fill out a form called a doing business as, because I'm not Demopoulos Associates. I'm Ted Demopoulos, or formerly Theodore James Demopoulos. In New Hampshire, it was $50, right? $50. It was a form. It was trivial. Now, in some jurisdictions, and this isn't legal advice, for example, in Luxembourg, my friend David Cizilli, when he started consulting, and this is his quote, the administrative part can take up to 2 months with all the papers. Unofficially speaking, because this is not legal advice, a lot of consultants just start and then deal with the paperwork and so forth later. This may or may not be legal, depending on your jurisdiction. In North Korea, they'd probably execute you. In Luxembourg, probably no one would care, but I'm guessing. Now, I started as a sole proprietorship. That means I am my own business. Now, you could be a sole proprietorship and use another name. I was joking that I was going to use the name Wingnut Technologies, but friends talked me out of it. So I went with Demopoulos Associates. You can be doing business as another name and still be a sole proprietorship. That means you are your company and your company is you. That's simple. Simple is really good. I love simple. The shortcoming with a sole proprietorship, the biggest one, is if your company gets in any trouble, gets sued, has any liability, owes any debts, and so forth. Well, any problems your company has are your problems because you are your company. You could create a corporation. Now, the biggest reason to create a corporation is it's a separate legal entity. If the corporation has problems, like they get sued or they owe money or somebody slips and hurts themselves while they're visiting you, it's not your problem. It's the corporation's problem. Now, there's something called an LLC, a limited liability corporation. This isn't a corporation legally. This is a U.S. entity, by the way, an LLC, but it has that limited liability, just like a corporation. Technically, it's not a corporation. Other countries have things like an LLC. For example, in Germany and Switzerland, they have a GmbH, which is something I can't pronounce in German. So Wikipedia defines a corporation as a company or group of people authorized to act as a single entity. They're legally a person. And there's different kinds depending on the jurisdiction. A C corporation is a full corporation in the U.S. S corporation is sort of like a corporation light. The biggest advantage, again, limited liability. There may or may not be tax advantages. You can have multiple owners, right? Sole proprietorship obviously can't, because you are your own business. You can't sell part of yourself. And there may be, you can issue stock and do other things. Now, what you pick isn't critically important because you can always change, right? You can start as sole proprietorship and incorporate. That's simple to do. Or start as a sole proprietorship and then become an LLC later. Now, a partnership may or may not be a legal entity. There's a lot of advantages in a partnership. Different partners bring different things to the table. Different skills, different contacts. That may be one of the biggest, because people you've done business with before are your most likely source of clients, certainly initially. Now, I've been down this line before. There's enormous potential for arguments, for disputes on everything, things you'd never think about. Even if you're in a partnership with someone that you've been friends since you've been in diapers with and known since then. Trust me, I know that. Put things in writing, hopefully a legal document, but if not, an email is better than nothing, right? You just document as best as you can. And I like to document what you've agreed on and what you have not yet agreed upon, which is, you're not going to agree on everything, that's okay. Now, my personal preference is partnering on specific projects and initiatives and so forth. But partnerships, full partnerships, are absolutely great. Now, a few other things you're going to need. You'll need some sort of digital presence, right? You don't need a website. You're not going to get clients because of your website. It's to give you credibility. Good friend of mine, Rick Berkovitz, has been a consultant working primarily in the technology space, a lot with security, although he's more of a chief operating officer type. He's for like at least 20 years. He doesn't have a website. He uses LinkedIn as his online presence. You don't need office space. I don't have separate office space. Well, actually, I do downstairs. I generally work. I have a separate office in my apartment. I generally work at the kitchen table because it works for me. When I had little kids, I rented a dedicated office just so I could get stuff done for about 10 years. Business cards, letters, envelopes, pretty much obsolete in many ways. Some clients may care. I like business cards. That's up to you. Insurance can be a big deal. In the U.S., health insurance is a big deal. Some clients will require liability insurance. Usually that's pretty inexpensive. Now, consulting is a growing field. Now, this is going to sound like a joke. I actually just changed the slide. It's in the last year, but it's the past few years, because I've been traveling much during the pandemic. I've literally met all these types of consultants. Now, I have no idea what a water consultant does, but an Infosec consultant, a lesbian dating consultant, and a woman that speaks with the dead professionally walk into a bar. Right? Sounds like the beginning of a stupid joke. This actually happened. I've met consultants that do all kinds of things. Now, I can't tell you that being a raw food consultant or a cosmetic packaging consultant is a growth field. I can tell you consulting in general is definitely growing. You can look up metrics easily, and Infosec consulting is very much a growth area. Now, we tend to think that experts, that the specialists are more experts than other people. So, who's more of an expert? A brain surgeon or a doctor that does general practice? You tend to think the brain surgeon, or the orthopedic surgeon that specializes in replacing hips, like my father did. We tend to think specialists are smarter than generalists. Now, that's not always true. I called my doctor yesterday. He's in general practice. He's a brilliant guy, and I literally know a brain surgeon. He's much smarter than the brain surgeon. However, you do need to specialize. Now, when I started, just saying you're an Infosec was totally a real specialization. It isn't now. You could specialize in verticals. So later today, I'm hopefully sitting in a talk by a friend of mine who specializes in security for small business. It's what he's into. It's what he loves doing. I know another consultant in Infosec, my friend Doc Blackbird. He does a lot in healthcare. Right? He does a lot in healthcare. Or it could be by specialty. Like, I'm a pen tester, or I'm this kind of a pen tester, or I do strategic security planning. I do a fair amount of that. I have some friends that they specialize. They do cell phone forensics. One of them does only iPhone forensics. Or you could specialize in both. Now, what you specialize in doesn't need to limit you. But I have clients that have hired me for one thing and that dragged me into other projects, often happily. I once got hired somewhere to assess how good the knowledge of their customer-facing security people were. The big networking company, you know them. And they ended up dragging me into corporate restructuring for Fortune 500. And they're like, well, I don't know anything about this. It's like, that's why we want you to help. You don't have any preconceptions and you're a smart person. So you need to specialize in something, right? But you may end up doing things all over the place, and commonly will. Now, the second most common question that I get is on pricing. The first is on getting clients. So let's talk about pricing. Man, we could talk about pricing for like hours probably. There's entire classes, like, graduate level classes on pricing. People have their PhDs in arcane areas of pricing theory and so forth. But guess what? Pricing is so easy for consultants. It really is. Most of it is real easy. So there's a concept of market-based pricing. So my daughter's actually texting me as I'm here, and I'm assuming she's reminding me she wants me to buy her some blueberries. Okay, what do blueberries cost? Well, what's the market price? I can tell you, I think they're in season now. I think they're finishing the harvest in Maine. I think they're in season, so prices are a little low. What do they cost? Well, it'll be a range from low to high. If I buy it at Market Basket, one of my favorite supermarkets, it's going to be relatively low. If I go buy organic at Whole Foods and a new one opened up here, it's going to be more expensive, but it'll be a range. Right? We might say, so what's a plumber in Des Moines cost? You can Google this, okay? These are the rough hourly rates. And, if a plumber has less experience or maybe less of a good reputation, they'll charge closer to the bottom of that range. If they have a better reputation, maybe a lot of experience, they'll charge closer to the high end. What if somebody charges way lower? I knew a plumber, unfortunately he's passed away. He was charging $25 an hour in Scarborough, Maine. It's like $25 an hour, like plumbers in Scarborough, Maine charge more. What's wrong? There was something wrong with him. He was a very good plumber when he was sober. When he was sober. Someone that knows him well said they had seen him sober twice in their life. So, yeah, you might say, I'll charge less so I can get started, and that may or may not work. But if someone charges way less, things like, why are they charging less? Is there something wrong with them? And so forth. Now, you can also have fixed rates, right? Fixed rates based on projects. Now, fixed rates can be great. It can be scary when you have a fixed rate, because what if it takes you longer or more resources, right? You can lose money on fixed rate bidding, fixed rate projects. You can also do real well. Generally for fixed rate, I will figure out the hourly, how many hours I think it's going to take in any other resources, and I will literally double the cost. You know why? Two big reasons. First, don't projects normally take longer than you think they're going to? Like, yeah, almost always. And secondly, you're taking on more risk, right, by having a fixed rate. So you deserve more potential reward. Well, this is for plumbers, okay? And this is a daily or hourly rate. There's other ways. We mentioned project-based. You can also have retainers. Retainers are paid in advance for work. There's other considerations. Geography. For example, I know incident handlers in the UK get paid less than they do in the US. Why? I don't know, but I know they get paid less there. Also, clients' fixed rates. Of my 30, I think it's 31 years now of consulting, most years I've had at least one major client that paid a fixed rate. This is what we pay. This makes it simple. Now, fixed rates are usually fair, or you don't take them. When I first started consulting in 1990, I had a client, they paid two different fixed rates for things that I did. The thing I did the most often, they paid $1,200 a day. Okay, it was like 1990. I was a lot younger. I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have kids. Like $1,200 to do something I thought was fun, take it or leave it. It was like, take it. You know, they're often very fair. Now, let's translate this to Infosec. Okay, you cannot easily Google prices for like an iPhone app pen testing consultant. Not as easily as, let's say, plumbers in Des Moines or roofers in Seattle or something like that. You may be able to find some information if you look online and talk to some people, do some OSINT, but it's not as easy, let's say, plumbers or tradespeople. Here's a model. I came up with this. There's no magic here. Take a current job salary. And by the way, job salaries are easy to look up online. Let's just pick round numbers. Say you're making $100,000 a year or 100,000 euros, and you work 2,000 hours a year. I know most of us, a lot of us work a lot more than that. So that's about 2,000 hours, by 50 weeks at 40 hours. In Europe, people say, oh, that's too much work. In the US, we're probably saying, oh, I work more than that. And then just figure out, just divide. That's $50 an hour. You have to at least double that. At least. Why? You don't have benefits. Healthcare in the U.S., paid vacation. They're not going to be sending you to conferences. They're not going to be buying you computers. Now, some people would say you should at least triple that, right? So at least double. You have to charge at least $100 an hour or $800 a day, bare minimum. You're not going to be working 2,000 hours a week, by the way, or 2,000 hours a year. Yeah, I've done it some years, but it's not common. It's just to get like an idea of where you should be. It is absolute minimum. Now, can you charge more than market-based pricing? Right? The formula I showed you is to get an idea of market-based pricing. Yeah, you can. Now, of course, it's not just about the money, and quite bluntly, I have never focused on maximizing income. Money matters. It matters a lot. It matters maybe more to me than you. I'm going to have 3 kids in college next year. Plus, I have expensive tastes. I can sit on the beach and do nothing and spend no money and be happy, or I can like travel in Europe and drink expensive champagne and have a lot of fun too. I have big expenses, So money matters. One, if you're considered an absolute rock star in the field. So let's say I needed a chief information security officer, CISO. Well, I know a couple of great CISOs. Pierre Noel, old friend of mine, he was CISO for Microsoft Asia Pacific, CISO for Huawei, the entire company, the telecommunications giant, which is massive everywhere worldwide except for the US and Australia. Or how about Dr. Eric Cole, right? He's a phenomenal CISO. If I wanted to hire either of them, okay, as a CISO, whether it's as a virtual CISO or full-time or part-time or it's like whatever term you want to use, they don't care what market-based pricing is. They don't care what the market rate is. First of all, I need to excite them. They say, dude, you should come do this. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do some great stuff. And I need to pay them what they ask, right? They don't care what Joe Blow, the most excellent middle of the range CISO's charging. He may be great, but it's like, and you got the experience, you've got the name and so forth. Another reason you may be able to charge more than market-based pricing. In every field, there are some people that want a premium experience or product. I don't care whether it's Infosec or baking cakes or yoga or anything like that. So a little before the pandemic, a friend of mine, much younger friend of mine, went to see some hip-hop concert. I like some hip-hop. I didn't think this person was particularly talented or amusing. And the ticket, I can't remember what the ticket was. It was like, they could get a ticket for, it was like under $80, right, to go see it. You could also pay for a better ticket. You got a better seat. They also had a package that was like, it was over $1,000, where they picked you up in a limo. They drove you. You get to go backstage just for a little bit of time. You didn't get to meet the band or anything. Now, in either case, you got to go see the concert, right? Some people want that premium experience, and it might not even really be that significantly better. So let's make this concrete. I have a friend named Kara. Kara decorates cakes. Okay? She's into cake decorating. It's her passion. And she teaches people how to decorate cakes. Like, okay, decorating cakes. Like, there are people that do that professionally, and, there's some awesome bakeries and bakers. And she doesn't work with them. She works with primarily women, as she put it, her marketplace, primarily housewives, primarily women at home. They may or may not have a job. They're around her age. They're just decorating cakes because they like it. They love doing it. She has a few men, but very few. Okay. She decided she was going to hold an event at her house. You can come hang out with her for the weekend and decorate cakes. Not just you and like, I think she had 10 people or something like that, or she capped it at 10. She charged $12,000 to come hang out with her at her house and decorate cakes for a weekend. Right? Crazy, right? Guess what? She sold out. Some people always want that premium experience or product. Third reason, the results are critical, right? Even a slight perceived improvement is worth a lot. You can keep the CEO out of jail. The CEO doesn't care what you charge. Maybe you're just a little bit better than someone else. They'll pay a lot more. Or maybe you can save a life. I had a health scare not too long ago. Right? Turns out it wasn't anything significant. I didn't care what the doctor charged. I didn't care if insurance covered it. It was like, if this might save my life, I don't care. I want the best. Now, I don't like writing proposals. I think I already mentioned this before. As a consultant, you have a lot of freedom. Sometimes a proposal is necessary, okay? A formal or informal proposal. If I write a proposal, I don't care if it's formal or informal. I want it to be a formality. Okay, I'm not going to answer a request for proposals, an RFP, unless they really want me to. I need to be invited, like, we really want you to do this, and I still might not. Generally, I want to already have an agreement with the person to do the work with. Like, we've already come to a, when I say conceptual agreement. Yeah, this is what they want done. I can do this. We're going to do it this way. We talk back and forth. We've got a conceptual agreement, and I simply document it. If we don't have a conceptual agreement, I've just talked to somebody about doing something, like, send me a proposal. I find they're usually just trying to get rid of you. It's like, okay, yeah, send me a proposal. Maybe I'll look at it. Maybe I'll think about it. The ideal proposal is just a formality. You've already got conceptual agreement. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get the work, but you've got a very good chance. If it's not a formality, and even usually when it is, you want multiple options, like multiple chances for the person to say yes. What if a proposal just says, this is what I propose? Well, it's yes, no, or ignore, which is no. I like 3 choices. The medium choice, this is what we talked about. This is what I think we should do. This is what makes sense. a low option, saying, this is the minimum I think you should do. You know, whether I do it for you or not, I really suggest you do at least this. And then a high one, in a perfect world, this is what we should do. This would be awesome. This would be great. In a perfect world. But we're not in a perfect world, and, you know, we have limited resources. But in a perfect world, now, they usually go for the medium. High, maybe 2% of the time. Do not put any high level in a proposal unless you can actually deliver it, because it gets chosen sometimes. A few years back, I spent 7 weeks in Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi's a nice enough place. It's very pretty. I was on the beach, you know, which is of limited use when you're working. But it's because somebody had a high proposal, had a high level in a proposal, and I was part of it, and I didn't want to spend 7 weeks in Abu Dhabi, right? So make sure you can deliver it. It was well paid. It was great work. I'm not complaining. But it's basic psychology, right? Multiple chances to say yes. Now, there's going to be a price, right? Like what you're charging. We talked about pricing. Now, this is going to sound a little odd. First of all, I will help people for free. I will talk to essentially anybody, right? At some point, I'll tell them, it's like, hey, look, you know, I consult as a living. We're crossing the line to like paid services. Glad to talk to you for half an hour or whatever. But we're crossing the line to paid consulting. Let's talk about how we can work together. Sometimes there's no negotiations that are necessary in price. And by the way, often the word negotiate is not used at all. But the basic rule is you don't negotiate on price. You're not selling used cars, right? You're not selling used camels. You're not selling real. You're a professional. You negotiate on value. If they're like, I like that middle level in your proposal, but it's a little too expensive. You know, you want 100,000, we have 85,000 in the budget. Well, you might say, okay, well, for $85,000, this is what I can do, right? You remove some of the deliverables. Say, okay, maybe the final report, you will write the final report for the project, and I will review it. Or we'll leave this part out. If you concede on price, they have to concede on something too, right? If you're fighting on price, something's wrong, right? You're like acting like Walmart. And, you know, Walmart competes on price, and they're very good at that. You don't want to compete on price. You want to compete on value. You want to be a great deal. You definitely want to be a great deal. You don't want to be cheap, though. Now, that said, every year, I might do one or two things for free. I've done some work for free for charities and good causes and so forth. We're like, you can't pay me? Okay, I'll do it just to help out. I've done this with some really good clients as well that have paid me well. And there's like a project, usually a small thing that means a lot to the buyer, who's usually become a friend. And they'll be, you know, this is all we have in the budget. It's like, that's not enough money. I can't just, like, I'll just do it for you. It's like, I'll do it to help out. And they usually end up paying you anyway. Now, a lot of consultants start with a bang. And then after a few years, their contacts dry up. This is really common. They start very successfully because you've already got work lined up and so forth. Then it just kind of fades away. You need to keep a steady stream of potential work coming in. We talk about having potential new or re-engaged clients in the pipeline. That's the term that's used. If you do that, right, you're hopefully going to avoid this feast and famine cycle where, like, you got lots of great paying work. You can't imagine ever not being busy. Life is good, except maybe you don't sleep enough, you don't take enough time, but you're doing exciting stuff. It's awesome. Then you finish the work. You haven't been doing anything to acquire any new work or to be visible to others. And all of a sudden, you have a slow period and you can't remember back when you were busy. Well, you need a steady stream of clients. So let's talk about ways to get clients, okay? Lots of different ways. Now, the most common people to hire you, the most likely people to hire you are quite literally people you've worked with before. There is risk in someone hiring you. whether it's full-time or as a consultant, or there's risk. There's less risk if they've worked with you before. So you've worked with others before, right? It's so easy to find people these days, like on LinkedIn and other social media and online. It was harder when I started. So who have you worked with? Like, where are they now? Just contact them. Tell them you're going to start consulting, even if you're not sure. Just reach out. Say, hey, how you doing? Great to touch bases. Let you know. Want to talk for a few minutes, or what's up, or something like that. My first client was a company, an industry consortium called the Open Software Foundation. And literally, people I worked with at Hewlett-Packard had gone to work there. So it's people I had been working with like a few months before. You know, and if I take a look at my first 3 clients, my second client was Motorola. And I had worked with them before as part of my first job, right? I had worked for them, and they needed some consulting. They needed some help. They knew I was consulting. They knew how to contact me because I touched bases with them. And they hired me. My third client was actually Hewlett-Packard, my previous employer. This one shocked me. They reached out to me. And trust me, I was not the ideal employee at all. I wasn't bad. I was actually a pretty good employee. I just didn't fit the mold. It wasn't the right place for me to be forever. So people you've worked with before, they're your biggest source of clients, at least initially, and also in the longer term. And people move from company to company, which is awesome. Secondly, referral. Trusted party referring another trusted party. A friend introducing a friend. Right? You ask for referrals. In most of my big clients, I've had internal referrals. Yeah, I've asked, hey, if there's anywhere else here, anyone else I can help here, let me know. Or if there's anywhere else I can provide value, or, introduce me to people and so forth. And I usually do this when I'm most of the way through a project and it's not done yet, but it's looking good. You can also ask for referrals, people you've worked with before that you're not working for now. It's like I'm starting to consult. Hey, this is what I'm doing. What's up with you? If there's anyone I can help, let me know. Introduce us. Your local community, right? Your accountant, your doctor, your attorney. Now, in your local community, I don't suggest going out of your way to do this. But just when you normally see your doctor, say, hey, doc, you know what I do? I'm an information security consultant, or I do cybersecurity, or whatever term you think is going to resonate with them. If there's anyone you know that I can help, let them know. Now, I'm probably talking to my attorney in the next probably 2-3 weeks. I'll remind them. Hey, I do some expert witness work in security. If there's anyone I can help, introduce me. It probably won't work for them directly because they do family law, and I'm not getting involved in family law and cybersecurity, most likely. Third, now this is an easy one. This one takes longer, though. Volunteering. There are so many organizations out there that are looking for volunteers, right? B-Side Charlotte was probably looking for volunteers not too long ago. Might still be. I know I just saw something from BrewCon in Belgium. Actually, they're in Belgium. That's a great conference. They were looking for volunteers. They're actually tweeting this out. As a volunteer, even if you have very little experience, you're going to meet and interact with some pretty senior people, right? You're interacting with them as peers. You now work for them, even though you're working as a volunteer, right? They qualify as people you've worked with, and they're more likely to hire you now, right? I suggest volunteering for more than a year, right? Also saying, I worked with, B-Side Charlotte or DEF CON or BrewCon adds a lot of credibility. Now, admittedly, I've done less of this than I could, part because of my busy travel schedule, and I still have 3 teenagers. It's easier than when they were smaller. But for example, there's an Infosec group in Maine, and it doesn't make sense for me to volunteer to be some sort of an officer or something like that because I travel traditionally and can't make a lot of the meetings. But when they had a CISSP study group, I said, well, what can I do to help? It's like, I could do a 2 or 3 hour session on crypto for people taking the CISSP exam. All right, I can do that. There's other organizations other conferences, like, I can help you with marketing for this. You know, I know a little bit. I can help get the word out and so forth. Now, you can also volunteer for good causes, hopefully ones you believe in. This can work really well. Now, it turns out in a lot of organizations, in most businesses, high-level people, including executives, are encouraged to volunteer. And if you volunteer, you're working with them as peers, and they may not be able to hire you or be in a position, but if the boss's boss says, oh, we need some help with this, go talk to Ted. Man, that's a referral with enormous weight. And I have had the boss's boss refer me to someone. It's like there was no question on could I do it or what was I going to charge. It was like, do you have time? Can you help us? I've done some volunteering here. I've done some with Special Olympics for swimming in New Hampshire. I didn't do this because I was expecting to find any work, right? But I've done a little bit of this. I will probably be doing more of this as my children are older and so forth. Speaking. So I heard something interesting. I was in a webinar recently, and apparently the biggest fear that people have, according to many surveys, is public speaking. Yeah, an enormous fear. Trust me, I'm not a natural speaker. I was so afraid of speaking, but we can all speak. We all have experiences and knowledge to share, right? And if you're a speaker, you're considered to be an expert. Just the fact that you're speaking, even if you're not very good, you might have good information. You have high visibility. I absolutely get work through my speaking. Now, that's one of the reasons I speak. I speak because I enjoy it. I like doing this. Now, notice we're saying consultants are experts. So let's talk just a second on this expert idea. Expert, we're all experts. I know I used to shy away from that term. I'm not an expert. Expert doesn't mean number one expert in the world. Expert doesn't mean there's nothing else for you to learn. Expert's a relative term. Expert just means you have valuable information that can help others. And sometimes the biggest expert, the one with the most expertise, is not the best one to help an organization. One that's closer to where they are, that's a few levels above them in knowledge, can be more helpful sometimes. So you are an expert, right? And speaking helps you, give you that expert status. Like if you're speaking, it's impressive, right? And you get high visibility. I remember I gave a talk once on application security, application programming and security for Microsoft. And it was a Microsoft conference in Waltham, Massachusetts. I was the last speaker on a Sunday. I had 4 people. Or was it 3 people? I remember one of them was snoring really loudly in the front. I had 3 active people. Now, those 3 people really wanted to hear what I had to say. And it was like afterwards, it's like, I remember telling a friend of mine who's in public relations, high-tech PR, it's like I give this talk. It's like, I was like, those people were there. I think I helped them out. But there was like almost nobody there. And one guy was snoring. And he's like, it doesn't matter. You spoke at Microsoft. Tell everyone. That's impressive. Even if people don't hear you speak. Even if they didn't like that you speak. They didn't like what you had to say. You have different opinions or whatever. The fact that you're speaking is impressive. Helps get clients. Writing. Now, I said I was not a natural speaker. Let's talk about writing. I always hated writing. English is not my first language, okay, for starters. My only fluent language. I hated writing in school. I was a math major. You know why? No papers, no labs to write up. I find I like to write if nobody forces me to. I become a decent writer, right? Writing's a learned skill. You can learn to write reasonably. I'm going to hopefully finish my 4th book really soon. I have a slide coming up that's saying it is at the editors, and it better be, because I think I'm finishing it today and getting it to the editor over the weekend. You can learn to write just like you can learn to speak. It doesn't have to be a book. They can be articles and so forth. There are so many things you can write. They position you as an expert. They give you visibility. I've definitely gotten a lot of clients through writing. Friend of mine, Ken Hartman, wrote a paper on Bitcoin, on BitTorrent and the legal aspects of BitTorrent. Now, he's not a lawyer. He had to do a lot of research. He put a lot of time into that paper. Oh man, he's tracked a lot of work to that paper, a lot of expert witness and other work to this one paper that he wrote that went online. Now, there are so many techniques you can use. Those are the big ones. Okay, what technique is going to work for you? First of all, I don't know what's going to work for you. You don't either, so you try different things. I have two friends that speak at the RSA conference every year. They speak at RSA. Okay, I've never spoken at RSA. Maybe I will next year, who knows? One of them gets new work every time he speaks at RSA. He gets another client every single time. The other one, he doesn't get any work. He gets visibility, he gets bragging rights. Maybe it helps him in the long term. It almost certainly does. I do some teaching for the SANS Institute. I've been teaching for them off and on for about 18 years. I don't get many clients from that. I have a couple of friends I was talking to yesterday who also teach for SANS. They get most of their work through SANS. I have friends that write and don't get any work through that. I definitely get work through my writing. You know, now there's lots of things you can do to try to get work, right? I don't know what's going to work for you, so you try different things and see what works. Also, something that works for you today may not work in the future. A friend of mine, he's actually in Infosec law. He's a lawyer, but he works in information security. That's what he does. He used to get a lot of work through writing, and then just kind of stopped working. And so he's doing other things now. He's actually blogging online to do that. Now he's getting a lot of work from speaking. Now, you might need some outside professional help. And I don't mean like, but I don't mean professional psychological help, although you may need that. Lawyers, possibly expensive, usually worth it. What I do with lawyers, now I do pay attorneys for sure. I have no problem doing that. I have a few friends who are lawyers. I sometimes help them out with security issues. They sometimes help me out by looking at contracts and so forth. So I barter. My last book contract, I got my cousin, who's a very well-respected lawyer. It's not my cousin Vinny, to review the book contract, and I gave her a couple bottles of champagne. It was good champagne. Probably would have been cheaper to have hired a lawyer, but I don't use a bookkeeper. You probably most consultants do. Might cost $1,000 a year, maybe less. I use an accountant for taxes. I don't do my own taxes. Web and more designers. I have a group of women in Zimbabwe, quite literally, that I use for web design, for simple technical stuff, for administrative things, and so forth. Most of us don't have design skills. Most of us shouldn't spend time on things we can get someone else to do for $10 an hour or something like that. And the women in Zimbabwe are great, and they're extremely well paid by local standards. And I probably should use them an awful lot more because I have them on retainer. I use them off and on. They're always like, "Do you have more for me to do?" And I'm like, no, not right now, but it's worth having you there for when I need you. Now, I don't like the concept of sales. Just the word sales scares me. I think of, someone trying to sell me a used card. That said, I believe sales is an honorable profession, especially when done well. Let's talk about marketing. It's related to sales. Sometimes people combine them together. The purpose of marketing is to make basically sales superfluous. So you don't have to talk people into buying things. Marketing, in our case, is making yourself visible in a positive way. Why? By doing good stuff, by giving talks at conferences, by writing, by volunteering, by helping people. Right? I'm doing videos on YouTube. I've sort of had a little hiatus, but I'm starting them like this weekend. I've actually got a couple to actually edit this weekend. Right? I have one friend. He was a consultant. He's now retired. We worked together in Hong Kong. You know how he got all his clients? By having lunch with people. That was his marketing. At least once or twice a week, he'd take off. He'd say, hey, I'm going to go have lunch with somebody. And he'd always invite me along. I didn't go usually. It was someone usually he had worked with before, or he had met somewhere professionally. He got all his clients through lunch. His marketing was lunch, right? And it worked. And it worked really well. So you're always going to be doing something to make yourself visible in a positive way. You're always going to be learning. Now, it doesn't matter if you're a consultant or not, but especially as a consultant. Rate of change has sped up a lot with the pandemic. It certainly has. There's a lot of free and inexpensive education. There's some really expensive and very well worth it education. BSides Charlotte is awesome. BSides in general is awesome. I've taken from Coursera. Coursera has free courses on all kinds of things. I've taken 2 crypto courses from Stanford. I took a blockchain class from Princeton, and they're free, right? MIT Open Courseware, all of their stuff. Cybrary has some inexpensive. There's phenomenal free stuff on YouTube. It's amazing. Also, don't be afraid to pay money to invest in yourself. Also, just reading. Right, playing with things, having a home lab and so forth, just gives incredible things. Learning is investing in yourself, right? I invest both time and money. So since the pandemic started, it's like 17, 18 months. I've literally, I'd have to add this up, but I know it's been at least 10 classes that I've taken. Took 1 class on procrastination or avoiding procrastination. I took 1 class on risk management in security. I took 1 class on Security Operations Center. I took a bartending class, right? Anything that helps you learn. I took that one with my son. So is consulting for you? I don't know. I'm so happy I started consulting. You know why? Not because I've been successful and I've done it for 30-something years. And honestly, it's one of the biggest positive, transformative things I've done in my life. That's not why. Not because it worked out, because I had to try it. I would hate to say, it's like, oh, you know, I really wish I had tried consulting. If I tried consulting and it didn't work out, maybe I couldn't get clients, or maybe I just didn't like consulting, or for whatever reason it didn't work out, I'd be happy. I tried it. It's like I ran a marathon once. It's like, okay, I did that. I may never run one again, but I did it and I'm glad I tried it. Right? You can also start slowly. You don't have to quit your job. You can start consulting on the side. Right? And that's often very, very possible. That itself could be an entire talk, and is. So just real quickly, some resources. I've got some consulting and more videos on my Infosec Rockstar channel on YouTube. I've got more to go. I know I've got 30 or 40. I've got to sign up Successful Infosec Consulting. It needs work, but I've concentrated on getting clients, right? How to get clients. My upcoming book, it's a lie. It says it's at the editor now, but it will be by the time you see me. It should be within, 24 or 48 hours. I'm going to try to price the book really inexpensively too. I ran a conference last year. I'm going to do another one on consulting and entrepreneurial activities in InfoSec, right? Free is the plan, right? Free to attend, maybe a small amount of money if you want recordings that defray my costs or something. I'm not sure. I'm looking for sponsors. You find me on Twitter at teddemop.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to join with me. There's my email. You can even call me on the phone if you want, if I can help in any way. Anyway, I'm just going to finish by saying I'm so glad I started consulting. If you're thinking about it, you should look at it. You should try it. It may or may not be for you. I seem to think everyone should be a consultant. Obviously, that's not true. But if I was suddenly 70 years old or 80 years old, it's like, I never tried consulting. I wish I had. I didn't want to be there. I tried it. It worked for me. I would have been a success even if I decided not to be a consultant long term. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.